Live from Bloomberg's headquarters in New York, I'm Shanali Bassett.
And I'm Tim Stanovec. Welcome to Bloomberg Crypto. It's a look at the people, transactions, and technology shaping the world of decentralized finance.
And coming up, Bitcoin hits $72,000 for the first time since April, as inflows and election speculation helps drive the price higher.
Plus, we get some details on Kamala Harris and her plans for crypto from Democratic Congressman Wiley Nickel.
And we're going to talk to the author of Crypto Trader, Glen Goodman, about how crypto trading has become a proxy for the election, with the Trump trade in full swing.
All that and more over the next half hour. First up, though, we got to talk about Bitcoin because, as Shanali mentioned, it's rising above $72,000 for the first time since April. It surged over the last month around 10%. Right now at $72,413. Bitcoin seen by some as a so-called Trump trade because Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump embraced digital assets while he campaigned. Trump is ahead in prediction markets while polls show a neck-and-neck race against Vice President Kamala Harris. All that said, options traders have increased bets that Bitcoin will reach a peak of $80,000 by the end of November, regardless, Shanali, of who wins the election.
And I'm looking at the Trump trade because we are 1 week from Election Day, and you're taking a look in the red here. It's a basket of Republican outperformers and Democratic outperformers here in blue. You could see the straight switchover in early October here. And remember, when it comes to Bitcoin alone, Tim, you could argue that maybe this is about worries about inflation. You could argue about it's a place to store your money as digital gold. But when you see the other Trump trades that are out there and the way that they have been taking off, certainly you have to ask how much is priced into the Bitcoin market as it pertains to that optimism around Trump potentially winning the election ahead.
Do they know something that the pollsters don't know? That's the question. And maybe we'll find out in a week. I say maybe because it could take a little longer. Well, we did hear plenty of election commentary from our guests at DC FinTech last week. Here are some highlights from the event.
I'm optimistic about is we're going to see a change. We're going to see a reset. And I think we need that at the federal level. No matter where this plays out at the presidential level, we'll have a more constructive engagement with this industry.
In order for fintech to become mainstreamed across almost any realm, whether or not it be AI, whether or not it be crypto, is that fintech has to be able to make its case.
Giving voice to the concerns of those voters and of those Americans that unless we adopt rules for crypto here in the United States, crypto will take off, but it will take off in other countries and other parts of the world that will leave us behind. Provide regulatory clarity and some degree of consistency rather than simply lawsuits and endless court litigation.
Gary Gensler's reign of terror on the crypto industry is going to come to an end very soon.
The Harris campaign, like the Trump campaign, understands that 52 million Americans want to see crypto in their future, and that it's critically important that any new administration address those concerns.
The good news about the United States is that the markets do tend to adjust. The bad news is that the predictions that are in play right now could skew the market expectations over the next few weeks.
Let's discuss the role that crypto has played in the race, both for the White House and Congress, with Bloomberg campaign finance reporter Bill Allison. And I've just got to first do a big note of appreciation to you, Bill, because anyone who doesn't know you watching this program, Bill knows what's going on in campaign financing more than maybe anybody else. And one of the voices we heard for in that sound before we got to you was the chief legal officer over at Coinbase. When you think about just how influential crypto has it been more influential maybe in the down ballot races, even more so than the White House at this juncture?
That's where the focus of their major super PAC has been. They've been spending a lot of money on House and Senate races. They generally, they're a bipartisan operation. They'll back a Democrat or a Republican. Really the question is, where do you stand on crypto? And if you're against their industry, they're going to unload a ton of money on you, which we're seeing in, like, for example, in Ohio, where incumbent Sherrod Brown is trying to fight off Bernie Moreno, the Republican challenger. He had a 6-point lead in the polls. Fairshake opened its big wallet, and it's getting down to a neck-and-neck race.
But Bill, it's not indicating in the ads necessarily that this money is coming from crypto. In the case of that Ohio Senate race, for example, all they're doing is pointing out Brown's opponent and aligning him with Trump. They're not necessarily mentioning crypto anywhere.
That's right. They really have not. They've kind of played the traditional role of any other kind of super PAC, where if they want to beat a candidate, they're not going to talk necessarily about what their issue is. They're going to look at that person's weakness. They're going to look at where they can be hurt in the polls, and they're going to emphasize that. I mean, it's a strange thing because they have all of this money. They could be educating the public on crypto, but instead, what they're trying to do is win elections.
Bill, we thank you so much for your reporting. That is Bloomberg's Bill Allison. We're going to now discuss this all with North Carolina Representative Wiley Nickel. He put on a Kamala Harris campaign event with a focus on crypto legislation and has been in touch with a lot of members of the crypto community as well, from what I understand. And Representative, you heard what we had from Bloomberg's own reporting, from the FEC filings here, how much money has been in different races when it comes to cryptocurrencies. As a lawmaker, is there pressure to meet the needs of the crypto community at this juncture? What's at risk if you don't?
I mean, the pressure I have is how I can respond to the 52 million Americans who own crypto. That's really my focus. And we have a huge growing segment of the electorate on this issue. I think that's really the big thing that I focus on. We are not where we were 4 years ago, 8 years ago on this issue. Huge adoption, and we've moved bipartisan legislation in Congress. That's really the thing that I'm focused on.
What is Kamala Harris's stance when it comes to the cryptocurrency industry? What is the message that you have as a surrogate for her to the crypto industry?
Yeah, no, a huge shift here from the Gary Gensler approach of regulation by enforcement that we see at the SEC. I led the group of 71 Democrats to join with Republicans on Fit 21, the first ever time we voted on crypto in the U.S. Congress. Kamala Harris's position of protecting U.S. consumers, keeping digital innovation in the U.S., puts her squarely in line with the 71 Democrats, including myself, who supported Fit 21. So I think we've got a really good forward-looking approach by Vice President Harris. And if I can just say one thing about our opponent in this race, there's only one candidate running for president who's called crypto a scam, and that's Donald Trump, who did nothing on this issue for 4 years. So I think having Vice President Harris is a big shift.
Right. So you had also mentioned here that there's a difference between the Harris approach to crypto than what you're seeing with the current Gensler approach, that enforcement by regulation, if you will. So are you saying also that Gary Gensler will not be the chair to the SEC in a Harris administration?
No, I he's on until, for another year at least. But the position of the Harris administration is going to be very different than Biden on this issue. I think we're seeing that. We've seen that for the last few months now. I think that's really the point that I've focused on. We engaged with the campaign early, and this is a place where we've gotten a good reset. And I think that's, for anybody watching this space, you're going to see a very different approach from Vice President Harris than we've seen from President Biden on the issue.
Why do you think the consensus is, at least according to the folks we talk to each and every week, that the former president, President Trump, seems to be at least more friendly to crypto if he were to become president come January? Why do you think that message is resonating more with voters?
I think Donald Trump will lie, and he'll say anything, to get votes. I spoke just a few hours before him at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. He certainly has changed his tune a lot in terms of what he said publicly. I just don't take a lot of stock in anything that he says, because at the end of the day, he was a disaster for 4 years. And just stepping back, if we're talking about business, how would you have someone who was a CEO of a company where everybody who worked for the company, everyone on the board said he was a disaster? That's really what we've had with the folks who worked for him, who are saying, don't vote for him, don't support this guy. So I think on so many of these issues, including just democracy, which is certainly good for business in the U.S., he would be an absolute train wreck. But all I can do is talk about Vice President Harris and her forward approach. I think that's an important point.
I think we also need to talk about what would change in particular, because there has been recent reporting that federal investigators are probing Tether in particular. Of course, Tether has defended itself. They said that there is no indication that Tether is under investigation, but the Wall Street Journal reported on a criminal investigation, according to people familiar with the matter, seeing whether the cryptocurrency has been used to fund illegal activities by third parties. Now, Tether is a significant second client of one of Trump's very close allies and advisors, Howard Lutnick. Do you think that any investigation into Tether would end if Trump were to win office?
I'm very concerned about the connections there. I think that's something people really ought to pay attention to. I think Tether isn't one of the folks I would put in the good actors category. So, my focus has just been on the folks who are legitimate good actors in the space, who want to protect consumers and want to just do business in the U.S. And have a regulatory climate that is, pro-business. I think, we've got to keep those jobs here. We are seeing jobs leave because of a wrong-headed approach on this issue. And, like so many of Donald Trump's connections and he's really just more interested in himself and how he can make money off of something, what's good for his business. And I'm very concerned about the connections with the guy who it sounds like would be running his transition if he's elected president.
Hey, Congressman, who are some of those folks you've been speaking to who you do want to support?
For
in the crypto community.
SEC?
In the crypto community.
I think in terms of the SEC, we haven't had much diversity at the top at the SEC. There's a lot of great candidates. I'm not going to be making that choice, but I think you talk about people like Adrian Harris in New York at DFS, who's done a good job, with a moderate approach. There are a lot of great folks, I think, that are going to be in that moderate space that we're going to see when we get a President Harris in just gosh, what are we, a week now until the election.
Yeah, hard to believe. It's coming. Can't come soon enough, I think, for a lot of people. Congressman, do appreciate that. Adrian Harris, by the way, was on our program last week. If you missed that interview, you can check that out at Bloomberg.com and, of course, on the Bloomberg terminal. A big thank you to North Carolina Representative Wiley Nickel. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, coming up, charting the direction of Bitcoin and other digital assets during next week's election. We do that with Glen Goodman. And access all of the latest data and news on crypto, check out CRYP Go on the terminal. This is Bloomberg. Well, Bitcoin has been steadily climbing in the run-up to the U.S. election, with it passing $72,000 just in the past 30 minutes. Let's discuss more with the crypto trader, author Glen Goodman. Glen, thanks so much for joining us. What do you make of the run-up that we've seen in Bitcoin just over the last month, up close to 10% just in a few days? Why?
Well, it's pretty exciting. I mean, today we're within a hair's breadth, as I speak, of Bitcoin reaching yet another all-time high. There's a number of factors in play here. Global liquidity, I think, is a big one because Bitcoin has a very strong correlation to the amount of money, or sort of spare money, if you will, that's just kind of sloshing about in the world, as do stocks, in fact. Stocks tend to rise when there's a lot of money that people can invest in risky assets. And the same is happening with Bitcoin and crypto. So we're seeing a sort of strong correlation between stocks and crypto, also a strong correlation between both of those things and global liquidity, the amount of money around. Another big factor, of course, is the election is coming up in America, and Donald Trump is predicted by, the prediction markets, whether they're going to be correct or not, we don't know, but the prediction markets are saying Trump's going to be the winner. And now, that Democrat congressman who you just had on there, he was looking a little bit nervous to me. And I don't know whether that's because he was on telly and he doesn't often go on telly, or whether he secretly knows that his administration, the Democrat administration, would be much less hospitable to crypto than Donald Trump's administration would be. Because personally, I think with a lot of the moves that Trump's been making recently, he's a lot more amenable to crypto than he used to be.
He did make the point that the former president has called crypto a scam in the past. What do you make of the about face now?
Well, that's Trump, isn't it? He's full of about faces. I wouldn't call him two-faced, but he certainly likes to about-face. There's no doubt about it. And yes, he used to slag off crypto all the time, say it was rubbish, say it was a scam, whatever. But, then he changed his mind because he's got his own crypto business now, World Liberty Financial.
I will say, I will say, Glenn, a skeptic could say, you know, right now it's the election. He's trying to curry favor with a voting bloc that is pretty powerful. What indication is it to you that he will actually follow through on some of these promises that he's made?
Well, the fact that he's actually set up his own crypto business and launched his own cryptocurrency, you know, he's sort of putting his money where his mouth is to some degree. So that's kind of reassuring.
But Glenn, what kind of actual business have you seen come out of that?
It's pretty generous
effort?
to call that a crypto business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a bit sketchy, isn't it? Let's face it. But it does seem to be developing new ideas as it goes along. It's like they're kind of making it up as it goes along. They've announced a stable coin that they're going to produce. They've just launched their own token. But, you know, what is it all actually for? Nobody quite seems to know. But I think one thing that has really pushing the markets up is Elon Musk's involvement, because at that rally in Madison Square Garden, he came out and said that he's going to be, if Trump takes power, then he would be the head of, what is it, the Department of Governmental Efficiency.
Glenn, I want to bring us back away from the rhetoric a little bit and bring us over to the price movements, because, of course, being back at 72,000 is a moment for the market, and the fact that you have futures markets pricing in Bitcoin at $80,000 is another big move. So if you consider what has been priced in, how much has this most recent move been about the Trump trade versus other macro dynamics going on in the market, this idea that there's still underlying worries about inflation or even some of the Bitcoin flows you've been seeing?
The underlying worries about
flows, let me correct myself, sorry.
Oh, right, yeah, sure. I mean, you know, look, personally, I think the very recent moves, the most recent moves that we've seen are primarily about anticipation of Trump. And particularly because I looked carefully at sort of the minute-by-minute moves, and they have correlated quite nicely with the announcements and the news events that we saw that involved Elon Musk and the launch of that so-called department idea. Because it's Doge for short. Dogecoin, as you'll have seen, is going through the roof to some degree. And that's clearly connected to what's going on. So in a sense, I think Bitcoin's positivity and momentum is sort of coming off the back of what's happening to Dogecoin. It's like the tail wagging the dog to some degree.
Glenn, what happens then if Kamala Harris ends up winning the election?
Well, this is interesting because Kamala Harris, of course, became a little bit pro-crypto, at least on her website she did, because she discovered that black men in America, about 20% of them own or have owned cryptocurrencies. And so I'll tell you what she said. The website says that they will be supporting a regulatory framework for cryptocurrency and other digital assets, so black men who invest in and own these assets are protected. Now, that could mean two things. It could mean federal insurance protection, perhaps. So if, say, Coinbase collapsed as a company, then people who'd invested would, you know, be bailed out if need be by the federal government. That would be nice. Will that happen? Who knows?
Yeah,
but as for the down possibility, here in the UK, in order to protect retail traders, they completely banned crypto derivatives, crypto futures, all of that kind of thing, to protect people from themselves, as it were. Maybe that's what Kamala Harris has got planned, or Kamala Harris, who knows?
So crypto futures, of course, still in full swing in the United States. Glenn, we thank you so very much for your time. That is the crypto trader, author, Glen Goodman. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about Polymarket's role in betting markets. This has been one of the hottest stories, and how few users are skewing the U.S. election expectations on the platform. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Crypto. I'm Shonali Bassick, and we learned in the last hour that Consensys, very closely, of course, related to Ethereum, eliminating 162 positions. That's 20% of its workforce. It is headed by one of Ethereum's co-founders, Joe Lubin, and it cites broad macroeconomic conditions over the past year and regulatory uncertainty for the job reductions. It said in a blog post that multiple cases with the SEC, including ours, represent meaningful jobs and productive investment lost due to the SEC's abuse of power and Congress's inability to rectify the problem. We're going to discuss this more with Bloomberg's Wiley Nickel. I wanted to just give you a beat here on, what you made of this.
Well, it's definitely been a tough time for any business in Ethereum actually this year. It's not been an asset that's bounced back the same way as Bitcoin has. And so coupled with the reaction from the SEC and the regulatory enforcement that we've been seeing over the last year, that is likely also playing a part in the environment for Consensys.
So we want to switch gears now and talk a little bit about the latest thing that people are talking about in crypto, which is, of course, election betting, because Robinhood and Kalshi are taking on Polymarket now in event contracts to be able to bet on the U.S. election. And we know that since September, more than 100,000 Polymarket users have bet on whether Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, will win the election. Trump has been taking the lead, but we also know, of course, through your great reporting, that nearly half of all the purchase volumes comes from less than 700 users. And the app isn't even available in the United States. Emily, where does this go?
It's definitely a very interesting market at the minute. Polymarket itself is still trading Trump, a few cents ahead of Kamala and a few cents ahead of everybody else in the market. If you look on Polymarket, he's at about 66% likelihood of winning compared to Kalshi, which would have about 63%. So Polymarket is always skewed a little bit more in Trump's favor, but it's had a bit of a monopoly so far. It's definitely one of the buzzier election markets that are going on. That may change now that we have Kalshi accepting crypto, so encouraging on that side of Polymarket's business, and Robinhood also now offering election markets too. It's becoming a much more of a crowded market as we head into the election next week.
There's a big delta, though, between what the polls tell us about who is ahead in this election, which is nobody, it's a dead heat, versus what we're seeing on these sites. Can you explain that delta?
So there's a theory that for Polymarket in particular, because it's crypto-based, and so it might necessarily lean towards Trump more than other platforms because most of the crypto industry is quite pro-Trump. Trump has said a lot about wanting to support the crypto industry over the last few months, whereas Kamala has only really started to kind of make overtures to the crypto industry in the last few weeks. And so that's one reason why we think that there might be more of a skew towards Trump on Polymarket than on other platforms. As for the rest of the election market, it's a little bit, uncertain as to why they trade more in favor of Trump than Kamala than the polls do. One thing we can say is that those providers seem, they make the argument that, people betting on those election markets are able to provide you their updates in real time. This is data that you can see as and when they want to react. They can make a trade in a second, whereas polls take a little bit longer to get you that sense.
All right, Bloomberg's Wiley Nickel. Check out all of her reporting on the Bloomberg terminal and, of course, also on Bloomberg.com. It is going to be interesting to see to what extent in a week or more these prediction markets were wrong or right about the outcome.
Well, people are treating them as though they know something, to your point, that the polls don't know. And at the end of the day, there's money on the line and a lot of argument and debate out there about whether it should be on the line for these things.
Well, we'll see. Just a week to go. That is going to do it for Bloomberg Crypto. We are back in 2 weeks, taking a day off because of the election next week. This is Bloomberg.